The case you're about to see is fictional, but the procedure is authentic. The characters are played by actors, and the jury is selected from members of the public.
Members of the jury, Robert Hewitt and Frank Mallory each stand indicted on one count of conspiracy, contrary to Section 1 of the Criminal Law Act 1977. The particulars are that between February the 1st and March the 7th last, Robert Hewitt and Frank Mallory, together with Emily Coleman and Eric Mullins, did conspire to pervert the course of public justice. To this indictment, the defendants have pleaded not guilty, and it is your charge, having heard all the evidence, to say whether they be guilty or not.
May it please your lordship, members of the jury, I appear to prosecute, and my learned friend, Mrs. Foster...
Forrest.
Mrs. Forrest, I do beg your pardon, appears for both defendants in the dock. Now, there's Mr. Mallory, who sits on the left, and Mr. Hewitt, who sits on his left. Now, members of the jury, conspiracy is an offence which has been with us for a very long time. And you have heard that it is governed by the Criminal Law Act of 1977. Now, Section 1 of that Act reads, if a person agrees with any other person or persons that a course of conduct shall be pursued which will necessarily amount to or involve the commission of any offence or offences by one or more of the parties to the agreement, if the agreement is carried out in accordance with their intentions, he is guilty of conspiracy to commit the offence or offences in question. Now, what a mouthful. In plain English, what it means is the essence of the offence is the agreement. Now, let me direct your attention firstly to the particulars of the offence. Now, Robert Hewitt and Frank Mallory, between the 1st of February and the 17th and the 7th of March, conspired together with other persons unknown to pervert the course of justice by offering inducements to Mrs. Emily Coleman and Mr. Eric Mullins, who were members of a jury trying one Donald Hewitt, who happens to be the brother of Mr. Robert Hewitt, at Fulchester Crown Court. Now, members of the jury, on the 1st of February in this building, Donald Hewitt stood in this court and pleaded not guilty to the offence of inflicting grievous bodily harm on one Richard Tobias. Now, after a trial lasting some 5 weeks, Hewitt was eventually acquitted of the charge. Now, it is the contention of the Crown that that verdict was improperly influenced by the two defendants who sit before you today. It is the case for the prosecution that Donald Hewitt's trial, two of the members of the jury, Mrs. Coleman and Mr. Mullins, conspired together with the defendants to frustrate the due process of law, because not only was their decision corrupted, but it is the contention of the Crown that other members of the jury were persuaded to return a not guilty verdict by Mrs. Coleman and Mr. Mullins. Now, to be fair, it must be said the natural result of that trial may well have been an acquittal, but we shall never know. Now, would you bear in mind that I suggest that this was a carefully planned conspiracy. It was put in motion in order to obtain the acquittal. You may say at this stage, why isn't Mrs. Coleman and Mr. Mullins also being prosecuted for this offence? Well, this is a very unusual and serious case, and the Director of Public Prosecutions has decided to grant the witnesses immunity from prosecution. My Lord, I'd like to call my first witness, Mrs. Emily Coleman.
You may.
Now, Mrs. Coleman, would you like to confirm that you were a member of the jury at the trial of Donald Hewitt on the 1st of February to the 7th of March?
I was.
Now, we don't want to know what went on in the court or in the jury room, but what happened to you during the course of that trial while you were outside of this building?
I met Robert Hewitt.
And do you see Robert Hewitt in the court today?
Yes, he's sitting in the dock.
And would you please look at Mr. Hewitt? Now, which man is it?
He's sitting on the right.
Now, by the time you met Robert Hewitt, were you impanelled as a jury member? Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes. And how many days had the trial been in progress when you met Robert Hewitt?
It was the 3rd day.
And where did you go to meet him?
Well, I met him in a print shop, a shop that sells pictures and prints and posters.
Yes. Now, where is this shop?
Oxford Road. It's called the Spider's Web.
And is it close to your home?
Fairly close, a few hundred yards.
And how far from this courtroom?
Oh, 4 or 5 miles, I don't know exactly.
So, on the 3rd day of Donald Hewitt's trial, you met Robert Hewitt. Now, just take your time and tell the court the sequence of events.
Well, about halfway through the afternoon of the third day, a dispute developed between the judge and the lawyers. The judge called it legal nitpicking and said our presence wasn't necessary, so we were dismissed for the rest of the day. I left the building and walked down the high street here and waited for a bus. I got off at the corner of Oxford Road and Elm Avenue, and I walked along just window shopping, and then I went into the print shop. I'd been in there a little while, perhaps 4 or 5 minutes, when a man standing next to me said something. He made some comment about the picture I was looking at, and we talked, and he introduced himself. He told me his name was David Hammond.
Now, by what name do you now know this David Hammond?
Robert Hewitt.
Yes, carry on, please.
Well, he was pleasant and friendly, and we just stood there looking at prints of windmills, and we chatted.
Yes, now, this print and poster shop, is it the sort of place you can sort of walk around and just browse?
Yes, I go in there now and then. There are prints and frames on one side and gifts on the other, china, pottery, things like that.
Yes, so the man you now see sitting in the dock, we know to be Robert Hewitt. Now, he engaged you in a conversation, and he introduced himself as David Hammond. Now, had you ever seen him before?
No.
And what happened next?
Well, we talked about the things in the shop. We admired them. And then he asked me if I would join him for a coffee. I said no, I should really be going home. But he was very persuasive and charming. He could lay it on with a trowel when he wanted to. And he said it was early, and there was a tea room quite close by, which there was. I remember he said, could life be worth living if it had to be lived at such a pace that I couldn't spare the time for a little refreshment? So I went with him.
And where did you go?
To Helen's tea room.
Now, how far is this establishment from the print shop?
Oh, about half a dozen shops away.
There's no question of getting into a car or a bus or anything?
No.
No. Now, what time did you enter the tea shop?
About 4 o'clock.
And were there other customers there?
Yes, it was quite busy. We had to wait a little while for a table.
And what happened then?
Well, the waitress came over to take our order. He was always very good with waitresses and waiters. He said he liked meeting new people. He'd pretend he understood them. He would always say something friendly or make a little joke to porters or taxi drivers or shop assistants. He said he could get people to eat out of his hand. All he had to do was to show them he was aware there was a soul beneath the apron or the uniform.
Did he?
He was quite an operator.
And what did you talk about?
His wife.
And what did he say about his wife?
Well, I thought he was going to tell me she didn't understand him, but he didn't. He was too shrewd. He painted a very rosy picture. He said he was married to a marvellous woman, a wonderful mother, an impeccable hostess. He said he had 2 children, a boy of 8 and a girl of 11. He didn't have a bad word to say about any of them. It was rather like the picture on the front of a cornflake packet.
And did you discuss anything else?
Yes, we talked about property. He said he was in the area to look at houses, so we discussed house prices and schools and amenities, things like that.
Did he make any reference to the trial of his brother, Donald Hewitt?
No.
And did you tell him that you were serving as a jury member?
No.
No. Now, how long did you spend in the tea shop?
About 3/4 of an hour.
And what followed?
Well, we went our separate ways. I left first.
And did you make further arrangements to see each other?
Yes. He insisted on meeting me the following day. I said I was married and I couldn't, but he was very persistent. He said all he wanted to do was to meet for a drink and a chat. So I agreed to meet him the following day at 4:30.
And did you meet as arranged?
Yes. He was already there when I got there. He seemed like one of the regulars. The waitress treated him like a favourite nephew home from the wars. He'd probably left her a big tip the day before.
Well, perhaps he did, perhaps he didn't. Now, what did you discuss on the second occasion you met, the 4th day of Donald Hewitt's trial? That would be February the 4th on the Thursday.
Well, it was very like the day before, only somehow it was more personal. For one thing, we had a corner table, and there seemed to be a more intimate atmosphere. He asked me questions about my husband and my children, domestic things.
Yes, and would you tell the court what you told him?
What? Everything?
Yes, if you would, please.
My husband was a fine man, but there were things lacking I considered essential.
You say was. Is Mr. Coleman now deceased?
We're separated, Your Lordship.
I see. Carry on.
Thank you, my lord. Now, what else did you tell Robert Hewitt?
Well, we talked about our respective partners and how compatible we were. And he asked me if I had the chance to go back and do it all again, would I still choose the same man? And I said no. He asked me why not, and I said, my husband was kind, but cold.
Now, by cold, you mean unemotional?
Yes. I said if I could have picked, I would have picked someone who would have shown me a little more affection.
And what did he say to that?
Well, he said, since I'd mentioned it, that was the only thing he had against his wife, that she wasn't more affectionate. She didn't show her love. That's what he said.
And in fact, we now know, of course, this was a complete invention. He had no wife at all or any children. Now, let's jump forward a little. Would you tell the court how you found out that he wasn't married?
Well, I don't know why, but I became suspicious, and I followed him home one night and confronted him. He was reluctant to let me into his flat, but once inside, it was obvious that the wife and children were an invention.
What did you find obvious?
Well, it was more a question of what I didn't find. I mean, there were no women's clothes. There was only one bedroom. There was no indication of the presence of a woman. There were no toys, nothing.
So it would be true to say that an intimate relationship quickly developed.
Yes.
Now, who would you say took the initiative in that progression?
Well, he did. He was very keen, very ardent. I didn't think it was odd at the time.
Now, let's return to the 4th. Now, did you rendezvous on the Friday?
No.
When did you meet again?
The Sunday.
Now, this would be the 7th of February. Now, were you once more patrons of Helen's tea room?
Oh, no, I got promoted.
Got promoted?
We drove into the country to a very smart hotel, the Imperial.
Yep.
We had lunch, we went for a walk, and then he told me he'd booked a bedroom, and I said, all right. After, he told me his real name, and I was shattered. I realized he was the brother of Donald Hewitt. He said he'd watched some of the trial from the public gallery, and that he knew I wouldn't have had anything to do with him if I'd known from the start that he was the brother of the man on trial.
Yes. Now, on this second occasion, was the trial of Donald Hewitt discussed at all?
No.
There was no mention of it?
No.
So you talked of what, domestic issues once more?
Yes.
And what were your feelings towards Robert Hewitt at this time?
I was infatuated with him. He was very affectionate and attentive, and he made me feel very good about myself.
And were these things lacking in your personal life?
They were, and they've been lacking for years.
Yes, I see. Now, on the Sunday, the meeting at the Imperial Hotel, now, did you see Robert Hewitt during that week?
Yes, I saw him whenever I could get away.
Now, on the second Sunday, which would have been the 14th, now, what happened on that day?
We went to the Imperial Hotel again.
Yes, indeed. What happened at the Imperial Hotel?
Well, while we were having the meal, Frank Mallory walked past, and the two men greeted each other.
Yes. Now, do you see Mr. Mallory in the courtroom?
Yes, he's sitting beside Hewitt in the dock.
Thank you. Now, did this meeting appear to you as if it happened by chance?
Oh, yes. Robert seemed genuinely surprised. He introduced Mallory as one of his friends. Mallory was with a woman, Sheila. She didn't say her surname. In fact, she said very little. The two men talked about the trial, and Mallory said it was going badly because the police were lying, and he said he knew for certain that the prosecution they had fixed the medical evidence. He said it happened all the time.
And what was Robert Hewitt's reaction to this?
He pretended not to accept it. He said Mallory was making it up. He said that he knew his brother better than anybody, and he knew how violent he could be. The two men argued about it for quite a long time.
Yes. Did you personally make any contribution to this discussion?
I said nothing.
No. And what happened next?
Well, nothing. Mallory left, and Robert and I spent the rest of the day there.
Yes, and after Mallory left, was the trial discussed at all?
No.
So now began the third week of Donald Hewitt's trial. Now, did you continue to meet Robert Hewitt?
Yes.
With the same frequency as before?
Yes.
And was the trial discussed at all?
Well, once or twice he would mention it. He said, I wonder if Frank's right. And when he asked me what I thought, I said I couldn't discuss it.
Yes. And what happened during this third week of the trial?
That's when he started buying me presents.
Yes. Now, would you look at these, please, Mrs. Coleman? And tell me if you recognise them.
Yes, these were the presents Robert Hewitt gave me.
My lord, may they be exhibited as 1 to 3?
Very well. What is the value?
My lord, my learned friend and I, Mrs. Frost...
Forrest.
Mrs. Forrest, I do beg your pardon, have agreed the value of £400.
Thank you.
Now, were there other gifts, Mrs. Coleman?
Yes, he bought me things for the bathroom, toilet water, cologne, soap on a rope.
Soap on a rope? I beg your pardon. Now, over what period did these, you receive all these gifts?
From the third week of the trial until the end of April.
And did you ever see Mallory again?
Yes.
When was this?
On the following Saturday night.
And was this meeting also at the Imperial Hotel?
No, Robert had taken me for dinner to a restaurant, the Boulevard, on the other side of the Fulchester bypass. During the meal, he said he had to see Mallory, and so we met him later in the bar of the George Hotel. Mallory said he had proof that the police surgeon was lying and that the prosecution were deliberately exaggerating Tobias's wounds so that they could put Donald Hewitt away.
Did he offer any proof?
He said the photographs of Tobias's wounds had been touched up and that he could introduce us to the photographer. He said the whole trial had been rigged. He said Tobias had been put up to lying when he complained that he suffered from severe headaches. Well, that's why, when Tobias died, I didn't know what to do. That's why I went to the police. I was so shocked. I realised how they'd taken me for a fool.
Yes, now, since you've touched on it, Mr. Richard Tobias, in fact, died on the 12th of May. Now, when did you report your part of this affair to the police?
May the 14th.
And why did you go to the police?
Conscience.
You realised you had done wrong?
Yes, and I was deeply ashamed.
And you went to the police knowing that you'd be placing yourself under very stressful circumstances?
Mrs. Forrest has not said so, but I say you are leading the witness.
I do beg your pardon, my lord. Mrs. Coleman, did you have any idea of what was likely to happen to you once you went to the police with your allegation?
No, but I had to go. I couldn't come to terms with it.
Let's return to the bar in the George Hotel. Mallory, you say, made claims concerning the trial of Donald Hewitt. Now, what was Robert Hewitt's reaction?
Well, he pretended to be persuaded. It seemed that Mallory was putting up a very strong argument and Robert was becoming convinced. That was the first time he asked me if something could be done once the jury went out.
Yes. And are you sure it was Robert Hewitt who made this request?
Yes, and Mallory kept backing him up. He said if I could put pressure on the rest of the jury, it would balance the trial. He said it was the only way there could be a fair verdict.
And did Mallory or Hewitt offer you any inducement on that occasion?
Well, they hinted in vague terms.
Well, you say vague, but I mean, did you understand that you would be paid for your cooperation?
Yes, I was told I would be paid.
And did anything follow this meeting in the George Hotel?
Yes, the following night I met Robert Hewitt and Frank Mallory again, and this time they had with them a man they called Sylvester. He said he was a photographer, and he admitted that the photographs of Tobias's wounds had been touched up.
Now, did you just accept this, or did you ask for any proof?
Well, I did tell him I didn't know him from Adam, but he showed me a card, and he seemed so genuine. He said if I wanted to check, I could telephone the studio.
And did you?
No.
And what happened next?
Well, they told me how urgent it was that the jury return a verdict of not guilty, or Donald Hewitt would probably never come out of prison alive. They said the police had a grudge against him. They said if I could convince the rest of the jury, it would be worth a lot of money to everybody. They said those I could convince by argument, fine, and those who wouldn't be persuaded, I could give them money. And that's exactly what happened. When the jury went
well,
out,
we
I
need not
argued...
know actually what happened once the jury had retired, but you personally, what was your reward to be in all this?
They said I could be sure Donald Hewitt would show his gratitude.
And did you receive any sums of money before the jury retired?
Yes.
How much?
£1,500.
And did you receive this sum all at once?
No. Hewitt gave me £750 on the second visit to the Imperial Hotel and £750 after I'd met Sylvester.
And did you understand these sums of money as being by way of being a bribe?
Oh, really, Millard?
You are putting words into the witness's mouth, Mr. Griffith.
I beg your lordship's pardon. Mrs. Coleman, why did Robert Hewitt give you £1,500?
For my cooperation.
After the verdict, did you receive any further sums of money?
Yes, another £1,000.
So, making a total of £2,500. Now, Mrs. Coleman, after it had been agreed that you would attempt to corrupt the verdict, did you continue to meet Mr. Robert Hewitt?
Yes.
And what sort of relationship did you have with him then?
Well, it was all right for a week or so, but I could see he was losing interest. And anyway, I was trying to come to a better understanding with my husband.
And what effect did this have on your actions?
Well, I became very preoccupied at home. I really couldn't find the time for him.
And when did the relationship finally end?
At the end of April.
Now, in your opinion, what do you believe Robert Hewitt's motives were in befriending you?
I
But to
object,
get his-
Millard.
Yes, really, Mr. Griffiths, you know better than that. Let me make it perfectly plain, members of the jury, that you are not here to try Donald Hewitt. He was found not guilty, and you have put from your minds any speculation as to whether that verdict was a true one or a wrong one.
Just one or two points, if you could help me along, Mrs. Coleman. You say you met Robert Hewitt in a gift shop local to your own home. Is that correct?
Yes.
And you said you left the court halfway through the afternoon. Can you remember the exact time?
About 3:30.
No later.
Well, it may have been a little later. I didn't notice.
You didn't. At any rate, you can't recollect the exact time. Now, you say you walked down the high street, caught a bus, and went into the spider's web. How long do you think all this took?
20 minutes?
20 minutes, no more.
I don't think so, no.
Do you have children, Mrs. Coleman?
Yes.
How many?
2.
What ages were they at the time you were engaged in jury service?
10 and 12.
At school, then?
Yes.
And school finishes at what time? 3:30, 10 to 4?
They get out at 10 to 4, and I'd made arrangements with a neighbour to collect them, and they stayed with her until I could call for them.
Would you agree that you showed no great inclination to relieve your neighbour of her responsibility?
I wasn't worried about my children. They were being looked after.
Nevertheless, when you had the opportunity of picking them up earlier, I suggest you preferred to pick up a man.
Oh, my
and
lord.
that you picked him up at the bus stop, not far from this court. Isn't that so?
How dare you?
I suggest you met Robert Hewitt in the High Street, not 100 yards from this building, and not in the spider's web.
No.
I put it to you that this story of yours, this meeting, gazing in ecstatic rapture at windmills in some genteel suburban gift shop, is a total figment of your imagination.
It's absurd.
Yes or no, Mrs. Coleman? Mrs. Coleman, yes or no?
The prosecution in this case of conspiracy will continue tomorrow in the Crown Court. The case you're about to see is fictitious, but the procedure is authentic. The characters are played by actors, but the jury is selected from members of the public. Yesterday, the jury heard the first stages of the prosecution's case against Robert Hewitt and Frank Mallory, who stand accused of conspiring to pervert the course of public justice. Mrs. Emily Coleman, a prosecution witness, is being cross-examined by defense counsel.
Mrs. Forrest, you have once again attacked Mrs. Coleman's morals. But let me make one thing clear. Whether Mrs. Coleman has had extramarital relations with one man or 20 is irrelevant. Mrs. Coleman's morals are not on trial here.
Thank you, my lad. Mrs. Coleman, you admit you met Robert Hewitt on numerous occasions, both during and after the trial of Donald Hewitt?
Yes.
And you admit you went with him to hotels, pubs, restaurants, and on one occasion to the theatre in Fulchester, is that not so?
Yes.
So you suddenly found yourself with quite an active social life, is that right?
Yes.
Would you describe your relationship with Hewitt as intense?
Yes.
Supportive, rewarding?
For those limited periods I was with him, yes.
Were you living with your husband at this time?
Well, he was...
Were you living with your husband at this time, Mrs. Coleman, yes or no?
Yes.
Well, how did you explain your absences? Where did you tell Mr. Coleman you were going on these occasions? You lied, did you not? You cheated on your family. For months you became, if you were not already, a practiced liar.
Mrs. Forrest, do your instructions require you to attack the character of this witness?
After consideration, my lad, I think possibly I will withdraw the question. Now, Mrs. Coleman, you have told the court you received sums of money and items of jewellery from Robert Hewitt. Did you ever give gifts to him?
Yes.
What presents did you give him?
Well, I couldn't afford anything grand. I gave him small items, a pen, a knife with lots of gadgets on, small things like that.
I put it to you that when these gifts were exchanged, they were as a token of love and affection. And Robert Hewitt had no intention of trying to interfere with your duties as a juror.
There was. He said so. They both did.
I put it to you that because you could not match Robert Hewitt's extravagance, you showed your love by influencing your jury colleagues in his brother's favour.
No.
Now, the trial of Donald Hewitt ended on March the 7th. You continued to see Robert Hewitt after that date, did you not?
Yes.
And Robert Hewitt continued to lavish gifts and financial assistance on you?
Yes.
Well, you see, March the 7th is a crucial date. If Hewitt's motives in giving you gifts before that date were in order to obtain his brother's release, what were his motives in giving you gifts after March the 7th?
He needed to maintain the charade.
Charade? Nothing so simple as caring for you. Did you never think of that?
No, he's just cunning.
Oh, I see. 7 weeks later, towards the end of April, Robert Hewitt decided he no longer wanted to continue the liaison, and he told you
It was the other way around. I finished with him. I told him I didn't want to see him anymore.
Oh, when was this?
At the end of April, the 25th or 26th.
The end of April, so soon? After being so deeply committed, after being so enchanted?
No, it was an infatuation. I could see it wasn't the answer, and I knew Robert Hewitt wasn't all he pretended to be. I knew I'd been deceived, and I told him I didn't want to see him anymore.
I suggest that when it comes to deception, you are the master, or should I say mistress. Towards the end of April, Hewitt indicated that the affair should end. Isn't that the truth?
No, it's not the truth.
You begged him to reconsider, but he was resolved to terminate the relationship, and you were distraught.
No.
On numerous occasions, you told him you would be perfectly happy to live with him anywhere in the world. Isn't that so?
I have young children. How could I go anywhere in the world? That's a ridiculous thing to say.
And nevertheless, I put it to you that it was Hewitt who wanted to end the affair, and it was you who wanted it to continue.
I have told you there were no prospects with him. Oh, he could lay on the charm, but I could see that's what it was, a performance. It was like being with two men, the Hewitt who oiled his way through life and the Hewitt who stood back and observed.
When Hewitt ended the relationship and you finally had to accept that it was over, your love turned to hate and you wanted to hurt him. Isn't that so?
No.
Because you felt cast off. You were looking for revenge. And when Tobias died, you had your opportunity to get back at Hewitt. Isn't that the reason that you went to the police?
No, it's not the reason I went to the police.
That's why it took you 2 days to come forward. It was you who plotted, was it not, to get your story right?
No, it wasn't Hewitt I had on my mind at all. It was Tobias who occupied my thoughts. When I heard it on the radio, I couldn't believe it. I tried to ring Robert several times, and eventually I caught him. I asked him if he'd heard the news, and he said, "What news?" And I told him Tobias had died, and that those photographs and the wounds must have been genuine. And he said, "Too bad for Tobias."
I put it to you, Mrs. Coleman, that this tale of your conscience troubling you is sheer invention.
Why would I invent it? Why would I lie? Why would I go through all this? Do you think it's easy to stand here in front of strangers and have people like you probing into my private life? It's you that's making up stories, and it's you that's inventing.
Whatever your justification, Mrs. Coleman, you have engaged in deception over considerable periods. Could it now be that you no longer recognise where the truth ends and falsehood begins?
You malicious bitch.
Mrs. Coleman, I understand your feelings of outrage, but you really must not use such language in this court. Yes, Mr. Griffiths?
No further questions, my lord.
You may step down, Mrs. Coleman.
I'll tell you what the truth is. She's fallen for his sweet talk.
I shall not warn you again. Please step down, Mrs. Coleman.
What is your employment, Mr. Mullins?
I'm a self-employed electrical contractor. When I can get the work, that is.
And were you a member of the jury trying Donald Hewitt in this building between February the 1st and March the 7th last?
Yes.
Now, will you tell the court what happened on the first Saturday, the 6th of February?
Well, I like to have a bit of a flutter. And I was in the betting shop, and these two fellas up...
Mr. Mullins, would you please tell the court where this betting shop is?
It's up in Harrow End, near where I live. Anyway, I'm standing there studying the Oracle when these two fellas here walk in and begin to chat.
Now, would you please identify them?
Aye, those two there. Those two that I now know to be Robert Hewitt and Frank Mallory. Anyway, they started to discuss form. There was 2 meetings that day, one at Lingfield and one at Windsor, both over the sticks, and I was trying to work out a Super Yankee.
Yes, that's a form of accumulated betting, is it not?
It is, my lord.
With rather long odds.
Oh, yes, diabolical odds, my lord.
Yes?
Thank you, my lord. And Mr. Mallory and Mr. Hewitt approached you and they introduced themselves.
Well, this is a betting shop in the Harrow Estate. I mean, it's not a Buckingham Palace garden party.
I assure you, Mr. Mullins, I'm no more familiar with the former than I'm acquainted with the latter. They came up and started to talk to you. Now, who began it?
They did.
Now, did they tell you their names?
The one on the left called himself Charlie, and the one on the right, Tom.
No surnames?
No surnames, no. Or titles.
Thank you, Mr. Mullins. Now, what happened next?
Well, they just began to chat, you know. They said they'd done quite well of late. They said they knew a fella who worked in the stables at Kelmslow. Well, I mean, we've all heard that before, you know. Anyway, we made our bets in the first race. My horse went so slow it was lucky not to be arrested for loitering. Next thing I know, the one who called himself Charlie comes over to the counter, puts a finger to his nose and waves a wad of fivers. Next race, the same thing happens. The horse that I've got my money on decides to wait for a bus at the second jump, and this fella, Charlie, well, he hits the jackpot again.
And what happened next?
Oh, well, I left the third race alone. I mean, I was doing about 60 or 70 quid. Next thing is, they say they'll lend me the money to keep me going. And they say that if I want to stop sending the governor of the betting shop to Hawaii for his holiday...
Where?
Hawaii. You know, like Hawaii 5-0 in the telly.
Oh, of course, yes.
Anyway, if I wanted to stop sending him there for his holidays, I should get in on the act. Well, I mean, it seemed to be working all right for them. So we did a double forecast.
I want to remind you, Mr. Mullins, that you're still under oath.
Yes, my lord.
Mr. Mullins, at the start of your examination yesterday, when my learned friend asked what employment you were engaged in, you replied, "I'm a self-employed electrical contractor when I can get the work," that is. Do you remember saying that?
I do.
Well, when you're not working as an electrician, what do you do? How do you earn your money?
Well, that depends.
On what?
Circumstances.
Oh, what sort of circumstances?
Well, just whatever I can put my hand to.
Well, what kind of things do you put your hand to?
I'll tell you one thing. I've never drawn a penny a dole in my life.
I'm not accusing you of anything, Mr. Mullins. I'm simply trying to establish what it is you do to earn money when you are unable, through no fault of your own, to carry on your normal occupation.
Well, I'll put my hand to most things.
So, if, say, you were asked to do some gardening, you would?
I pulled a few weeds in my time.
And would you turn your hand to decorating, painting, or perhaps driving?
Yes.
Would you describe yourself as something of an opportunist when it comes to financial matters, Mr. Mullins?
Well, I like to eat.
Are you agreeing with me, Mr. Mullins? In financial matters, are you an opportunist?
Well, I suppose I am.
Yes. Let's return to the 6th of February. You're in Henry's, your local betting shop. How far is that from this court? Have you any idea approximately?
4 or 5 mile.
Well, that's not a great distance, is it, Mr. Mullins?
It is if you're no forwards pushing a pea up the road with your nose.
Answer counsel's questions properly. Yes or no will suffice in most instances, and Mrs. Forrest, we might get more speedily to our destination if you were a little less obscure.
My lad. Mr. Mullins, Frank Mallory has a flat not 400 yards from this court. Would you say that Henry's betting shop was a long way from this area?
The answer's relative.
Relative to what?
Well, it's relative to how many betting shops there are between here and Henry's.
And how many are there, do you know?
What do you mean, along the main road?
Yes.
There's 4.
Only 4, then it's no great coincidence that Mr. Mallory and Mr. Hewitt happen to be in the same betting shop as yourself, wouldn't you agree?
Everything considered, I would not agree.
Now, you say that both Mr. Hewitt and Mr. Mallory sucked you into some kind of betting operation, but you have said, I've no idea how they worked it. Is that correct?
Yes.
Is it your habit to gamble on the unsupported recommendation of 2 complete strangers? On a system they didn't divulge?
Well, it seemed to be working all right for them.
But so far as you knew, their claims to having inside information may well have been perfectly correct.
More probably perfectly unlikely.
But since they chose to keep whatever information they had to themselves, you can't be certain one way or the other.
No.
No, so what they told you may well have been perfectly true, is that not so?
Yes.
Yes. Now, by the evening of the 13th of February, with the aid of Mr. Hewitt and Mr. Mallory, you were winning £900. Is that correct?
Yes.
Oh, why did you not cease gambling while you were ahead?
Ah, well, you don't, do you? I mean, you see, it's not the winning. It's not the winning, it's the punting.
Oh, for some it's the reverse. Some people like racing and dislike gambling. Yeah?
But there was nothing to prevent you from stopping, was there?
No.
You could have walked off £900 the richer and in no one's debt, isn't that correct?
Yes.
Did either Mr. Hewitt or Mr. Mallory force you to remain in the betting shop and gamble against your will?
No.
And on your subsequent visit to Henry's, on the 13th, the 18th, the 20th, the 23rd and the 27th, were those visits forced on you?
No.
And the debts you accumulated over those 3 weeks, a total of £2,350, you incurred as a free agent, did you not?
It was a con.
Oh, so you say. I say that's a predictable response of an aggrieved loser.
You see, the first £900, that's what's known in the trade as a loss leader.
In what trade? Electrical contracting?
No, the grocery trade, my lord.
Oh, you've done a bit of that too, have you?
I have, my lord.
Yes.
Was it really so simple to take you in? Are you that naive? You knew perfectly well there was no such thing as a system, didn't you? I suggest your story of Hewitt and Mallory promising to wipe off your debt if you influence the jury is a complete reversal of the truth.
What do you mean? I haven't reversed anything.
Are you asking this court to believe that a man like yourself, who by his own admission is light on his feet and quick with his head, that such a man is so easily caught?
My adaptability that makes me occasionally gullible.
The truth is, they showed you a system which was by no means infallible, and because you did lose on it, Mallory and Hewitt were decent enough to shoulder your debt until such time as you could pay it off. Isn't that so?
Fairy tales.
Will you just answer yes or no? The jury will decide whether or not it's a fairy tale.
I put it to you, Mr. Mullins, that Hewitt and Mallory didn't even know you were on the jury. Isn't that so?
If anybody believes that, they'll believe that I've got the winner of the Derby written in the inside pocket of this jacket.
Mr. Mullins, this court is not the place to give tips on the turf.
Mr. Mullins, do you recognise this? Well?
Yes.
Will you tell the court what it is?
It's an AOU.
Between what parties?
Between me and Mallory and Hewitt.
And is the debt discharged?
No.
Now, will you tell the court what happened after your brother's trial started?
Well, I didn't attend court on the Monday. I went there on the second day. That's when I noticed Emily Coleman. She was sitting on the end of the back row, and I thought she was a very striking woman. And when the court rose, I went round to the front of the building because I'd parked in the old Odeon car park, and I saw Emily coming out of the main doors.
Just a minute. In what court was Donald Hewitt tried?
It was court number 3, my lord, in the old building.
Ah, yes, the old building. Please continue.
Yes. And she walked towards the bus stop, and as I passed, I nodded to her and I smiled. And she made a remark about the infrequency of the buses. So I stopped and we chatted, and I asked her where she was going. And she said, home. And we talked for quite a long while, and eventually a bus came along, and I asked her if she'd mind if I got on it with her. Because I was enjoying her company. We got on the bus. I told her I'd been in the public gallery and I'd seen her in the jury, and I told her I'd followed her. And she said, are you a policeman? And I said, no. She said, what are you then? And I said, I'm a judge. And I declare you winner of the Fulchester and District Best Looking Woman of the Month competition.
And what was her reply?
Well, she said, what's the first prize? And I said, dinner for 2 at a restaurant of your choice.
And what was her response to that?
She said, oh, does that mean I can take a friend? We chatted on like that for a while, teasing each other. And when we got to her stop, as she got up, I said, tomorrow the county championship, Thursday the UK, Friday the world.
You're sure about the details of this conversation you had with Mrs. Coleman on the bus?
I'm very clear about all the things we said to each other. She was very important to me. She meant a great deal.
Is there any doubt at all in your mind that this first meeting with Mrs. Coleman took place on Tuesday, February the 2nd?
No doubt at all.
And you're quite sure you first spoke to her at the bus stop near this court?
I'm certain, yes.
What happened then?
Well, I rode on for a couple of stops, and then I caught a bus back to town. And the next day it was the same. I saw Emily leave the Crown Court, and we chatted at the bus stop, and when the bus came along, we got on it together.
So you joined her for the ride,
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes.
Why?
Well, I found her an extremely attractive woman.
And did you have reason to believe that the reverse was also true?
You mean that she found me extremely ugly?
I'll rephrase that. Did you have reason to believe that she found you attractive?
Yes, I think so. Well, I certainly hoped so.
And you sat and talked together on the bus as you had done on the previous day?
Yes, but on the Wednesday, we both got off at the same stop, and we went to Helen's tea room.
Did you go there directly?
Yes.
And did you go into any other shop on the
No,
way?
no.
What happened in Helen's tea room?
We sat and talked for about an hour.
Did you realise Mrs. Coleman was married?
Yes, she wore her wedding ring. She talked about her married life a lot. She seemed eager to talk, to confide in me. And she unburdened herself. It seemed she wasn't happy. She mentioned there were several aspects of her life which had caused a deep disappointment.
And these disappointments were centred on her husband?
Yes.
Was she specific?
Yes.
My
After a
lord,
while,
this is
when
supposed to be a Crown Court, not a marriage guidance council. I fail to see the relevance between the relationship of Mrs. Coleman and her husband has to do with this matter.
Yes, Mrs. Forrest, I think it's been made plain enough that Mrs. Coleman was not living a life of matrimonial bliss. She herself has said so, and I suppose the jury are fully aware of it.
Millard, I consider this an important issue.
Nevertheless, I remain unconvinced that the jury will benefit from hearing the details. However, carry on, but tread carefully. Mrs. Coleman is not on trial, neither is her marriage.
I'm obliged, Millard. Mr. Hewitt, will you tell the court what Mrs. Coleman told you about her relationship with her husband?
she complained of a lack of affection. The longer I knew her, the more she added to the list of complaints. She indicated to me that the marriage was just a catalogue of disasters.
You say a list of complaints, but were specific examples mentioned?
Yes. She said her husband was a very cold man. Apparently he didn't like touching her, which struck me as very strange. But anyway, she said she thought he had another woman somewhere, but she wasn't sure. And she also said that their sex life was virtually non-existent. And then there was a matter of money. She used to describe him as being very tight. That's what she used to say about him. She used to say he was tight with everything. He was tight with his affections, he was tight with his emotions, and he was tight with his money. She used to describe him as the most constipated man she'd ever met.
When was the subject of money first mentioned?
The first Saturday we went out together. It was to the Imperial Hotel. She mentioned that she hadn't been to such a grand place for years. It seemed a kind of, well, awakener. She said that her husband never took her out with any style. In fact, she told me he gave her the same housekeeping he'd given her 9 years ago.
Did this prompt any response from you?
Yes, I asked her if she could do with a few pounds, and she accepted.
How much did you offer?
£750.
And was this gift conditional in any way?
No, not at all.
It's rather a large sum, isn't it?
I could afford it, and I told her she could pay me back or not, as she chose.
You also gave her gifts of jewellery, did you not?
Yes.
Were any conditions attached to these gifts?
I wanted to give her things. I loved her.
Mr. Hewitt, was your intention in giving Mrs. Coleman cash and presents by way of being a bribe?
No, if I'd simply wanted to bribe her, I would have stuck to cash.
Indeed. Let's return to the first occasion when you met Emily Coleman. Did you give her your real name?
No.
Why not?
Well, for obvious reasons. She was on the jury trying my brother. And if she'd heard my surname, she might have got the wrong idea about me.
What do you mean, the wrong idea?
Well, she might have thought that I was made of the same material. And I'm not. We've got the same father, but different mother, and totally different temperament.
But you did tell her your real name, didn't you?
Yes, when I thought she'd understand.
But even at that point, you weren't obliged to tell her your name, were you?
No, but I wanted to.
You also told her you were married, did you not?
Yes.
Well, why did you tell her that?
Well, I had been married, but I was divorced 4 years ago, and I don't really think up to that point I'd come to terms with the fact that my marriage was finished.
Let's move ahead now to the second time you were in the Imperial Hotel with Mrs. Coleman. This was on Saturday, February the 20th. You met Frank Mallory there. Were you acquainted with Mr. Mallory before this date?
Yes, I've known Frank Mallory for years.
Did you meet in the Imperial Hotel by prior arrangement?
No.
Well, whose suggestion was it that you should return to the Imperial Hotel?
It was Emily's. We'd had a very pleasant time there the previous Saturday, and she mentioned she'd like to go there again.
Was Frank Mallory on his own, or was he accompanied by anyone?
He was on his own, but a girl he met at the bar joined us later.
What did you talk about?
Well, it's a fairly lively atmosphere. We just chatted generally.
And was the trial of Donald Hewitt mentioned?
Yes. Frank said he thought that young Donny was for the high jump. He said it looked as if he was going to receive a long prison sentence.
Oh, and what did you say to that?
I agreed. I think young Donny's too wild, he's too free with his temper, and he deserves what was coming to him.
The case of the Crown versus Mallory will be continued in the Crown Court. The case you're about to see is fictional, but the procedure is authentic. The characters are played by actors, but the jury is selected from members of the public. During the past 2 days, the jury has heard evidence concerning the alleged attempt by Robert Hewitt and Frank Mallory to pervert the course of justice. Today, the jury will return their verdict.
Those were your comments to Frank Mallory, that your brother should be sent to prison?
Yes. Well, it's not that Donny's a bad lad. It just is that he will not or cannot control his temper. And I definitely thought he was guilty of causing grievous bodily harm.
Did Emily Coleman take part in this conversation?
No, she talked to the girl that Frank had met at the bar.
Have you ever introduced Emily Coleman to a photographer?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Have you ever introduced Emily Coleman to a man named Sylvester?
No.
How many times did you meet Frank Mallory after that occasion on the 20th of February in the Imperial Hotel?
Well, I saw Frank with the same frequencies I'd seen him before. We're both in the same line of business. He's in fitted kitchens, and I'd bump into him on the same job.
Was it ever your intention to set in train a conspiracy with Frank Mallory so as to interfere with the jury trying Donald Hewitt?
Certainly not.
Did you ever agree with Frank Mallory that sums of money should be used to bribe members of the jury trying your brother?
Certainly not. Absolutely not.
Let's turn now to Mr. Mullins. Will you describe to the court how you and he came to meet?
Well, it's as he says. We met in Henry's betting shop on the Harrow End estate.
It is Mr. Mullins' claim that you and Frank Mallory entrapped him in a gambling swindle and that he subsequently was in debt to the tune of £2,350 with you acting as guarantor. Is that true?
There is no truth to that at all. Mr. Mullins was free to come and go as he liked. He could bet or not bet as he chose. Being trapped is a figment of his fertile imagination, I suggest. It's not unusual in the betting fraternity. Gambling can become addictive, and it's not unknown for gamblers to lie and cheat about it.
Was it ever your intention to place Mr. Mullins in a situation where he might be vulnerable to bribery?
Certainly not.
Could Mr. Hewitt be shown exhibit number 4? Do you recognise that?
Yes, that's the IOU that Frank and I set out with Mr. Mullins.
And was it an ordinary transaction?
It was perfectly above board.
Did you ever tell Mr. Mullins that the debt would be overlooked if the jury in the trial of your brother returned a verdict of not guilty?
No. Donald was found not guilty. Now, if that debt was to be cancelled because Donald went free, then that IOU would no longer exist.
Members of the jury, Mr. Hewitt has saved me from making just that point.
Well now, Mr. Hewitt, having established you are able to draw a salary of £19,000 per annum before tax indicates shrewd business principles, sound common sense and a competent grasp of the financial world. Wouldn't you agree?
The world as it affects my business, yes, and luck.
Well, leaving good fortune aside, can you explain how, after being acquainted with Mrs. Coleman for such a short time, you were so casual with your money that you showered her with gifts and cash?
I was in love with her and I wanted to indulge her. It pleased me to give her things.
Now, you have a successful business and you've already indicated a healthy respect for the value of money. Are you telling this court you spent these huge sums on someone you hardly knew because you wanted to indulge her?
I could afford it. And when the mood took me, I was able to spend money as I chose.
Well, Mrs. Coleman said in evidence that her husband paid for all the financial affairs of running the family. She had a perfectly adequate income from her part-time work. I mean, why on earth did you think she needed all this cash?
Well, she told me that all the utilities were paid for, but there was never anything left for extras. She was always short of funds. She told me she had unpaid bills in numerous local shops and in 2 department stores in town. On the first occasion, I asked her whether £300 or £400 would get her out of trouble, and she said it would go some way. So I offered her £750. I suppose I wanted to show her I could afford it. I wanted to impress her. I think that's natural.
And you've said in evidence she could pay you back or not as she chose. Now, was any kind of contract drawn up for this loan?
No, none at all.
Well, as a businessman, surely that's not the way you conduct your business affairs?
We weren't conducting business affairs, we were conducting emotional affairs, and you don't draw up contracts for them, do you?
Well, I suggest there was a contract. I suggest you gave these cash sums to Mrs. Coleman in order to persuade the jury, of which she was a member, to find your brother not guilty. Is that not so?
It's not so.
Now, let's return to the beginning of Donald Hewitt's trial. You say you first met Mrs. Coleman on the 2nd day. Now, are you quite certain of that?
I'm absolutely certain, yes.
Are you quite sure that on the following day, the Wednesday, you went directly from the bus to Helen's tea room?
Yes.
And did you follow Emily Coleman into the spider's web on Tuesday?
No, I couldn't have followed her anywhere. I stayed on the bus.
Well, did you go into the spider's web on the Wednesday?
But
no,
Mr. Griffiths, the witness has already replied to that question.
I do beg your pardon, my lord. Mr. Hewitt, on the Wednesday, do you remember what happened on that day?
Yes, I remember very clearly what happened. On the Wednesday, we both got off at the same stop and we went directly into Helen's tea room.
Yes, and you remember word for word the conversation you had in there. Now, that sounds a bit rehearsed to me, Mr. Hewitt. Wouldn't you agree?
No, I certainly would not agree.
I suggest that you followed Mrs. Coleman on the Monday, the Tuesday, and the Wednesday. I suggest you stalked her. Isn't that true?
No.
I put it to you that you followed Mrs. Coleman at a safe distance, and you didn't begin to make your advances until you were far enough away from this building not to arouse suspicions. In other words, somewhere nearer her home.
No, not at all.
You introduced yourself with a false name. You say you told her your real name after you'd established intimacy. Now, what was the purpose of telling her your real name?
Well, I would have considered it very strange to have had an intimate relationship with a woman under an assumed name.
Well, it didn't seem to bother you when you first became acquainted, did it?
Well, no, there were reasons there. I've already explained.
Indeed you have. You also told Mrs. Coleman that you were married. Isn't that so?
Yes, I've already said why.
Why did you tell her that?
Well, because I had been married. I've already said I had been married and I'd never lost the sense of being with someone.
Well, you lost it enough to indulge new loves most generously.
Yes. Well, I've always tried to fill that gap in my life.
I suggest you told Mrs. Coleman you were married because you knew you were going to use your non-existent wife as an excuse to retreat once Mrs. Coleman's usefulness was over.
No, not at all.
I put it to you that you fabricated the whole story about having a wife and family, and that it was Mrs. Coleman, her persistence, which prompted her to find out whether you were married or not, and came to see you and forced you to admit you had been divorced some 4 years. Now, isn't that the truth?
Yes, but I was going to tell her anyway.
Isn't the truth that Mrs. Coleman followed you home on the night of Thursday, February the 25th, and confronted you and forced you to admit you were living alone?
Yes, but I was going to
tell her.
You had
invested considerable time, energy and money in Mrs. Coleman, if I may put it like that. When she terminated this affair, I mean, were you able to just walk away with it without even a backward glance?
She didn't end it, I did. It was just one of those relationships. We were very keen on each other to begin with. We were infatuated, I suppose. We needed each other for that period, but it became very complicated. She said her husband was getting suspicious and she wanted to leave him altogether. She said she wanted to finish that marriage and start another one. Well, I asked her if she'd wait a few months till we got to know each other a bit better, but she wouldn't. She said she was getting desperate. She was clinging to me. She was getting possessive. Now, I needed to be considered as a person in my own right, not just as the rebound from a broken marriage. So in the end, I told her I thought it would be best if we stopped seeing each other for a while. And of course, she was very upset. She was very angry. And that's why I'm here. That's why I'm here.
We shall let the jury make their own conclusion as to why you're here. I put it to you that it was Mrs. Coleman who told you she no longer wanted the affair to continue, and for your part, you weren't altogether unhappy with this because she had already outlived her usefulness.
No, that's not at all. That's not true. Well, after I told her it was over, she phoned me repeatedly.
I put it to you, Mrs. Coleman only phoned you once after she'd terminated the love affair, and that was to tell you that Richard Tobias had died. And when she told you he was dead, you said, "Oh, too bad for Tobias."
I didn't say it like that. I did not say it like that. I said, too bad for Tobias.
Oh, really? Now, you took Mrs. Coleman to meet Frank Mallory, did you not?
Yes, we met Frank purely by chance.
And was this at the Imperial Hotel?
Yes.
Now, do you usually frequent that hotel, Mr. Hewitt?
Go there from time to time, yes.
And did you meet Mr. Mallory prior to seeing him at the Imperial Hotel on Sunday the 14th?
I see Frank Mallory quite often. We're in the same line of business.
And you were saying that you met Frank Mallory in the week leading up to the 14th of February?
I think I did, yes.
And did you discuss your brother's trial with him?
Well, I suppose I must have, yes.
Why must you have?
Well, he's my step-brother, my lord.
Yes, but not someone you were at all concerned about, as I see from your earlier remarks.
Well, with due respect, my lord, because I thought he was guilty doesn't mean to say I wasn't concerned for the lad.
Very well. Carry on, Mr. Griffin.
Griffiths, my lord.
I beg your pardon?
My name.
Oh, well, carry on in any case.
Thank you, my lord. Now, how many times did you meet Frank Mallory when you were with Mrs. Coleman at the Imperial Hotel?
Twice.
And I suggest neither of those meetings were coincidental.
They were.
I suggest you took Mrs. Coleman to the Imperial Hotel because it is 20 miles from Fulchester and, as you thought, away from prying eyes.
No, we went to the Imperial Hotel because the food is good, the service unobtrusive and the surroundings congenial.
Well, was there no establishment closer with similar qualities?
There may have been, yes.
But in any event, you elected to travel 20 miles.
I did.
And did you ever introduce Emily Coleman to a photographer named Sylvester?
No. That's pure invention.
Well, let's turn your attention to Mr. Mullings. Now, you're saying that you and Frank Mallory met in Henry's betting shop by pure coincidence?
Yes.
And is the Harrow End estate an area you normally frequent?
Sometimes, yes.
And is it near your home?
It's a couple of miles.
It is, in fact, 4.5 miles, according to the survey map. Now, would you dispute that?
No.
Now, are there no betting shops in your own vicinity?
There are, yes.
Well, why did you travel all the way to the Harrow End estate?
Because I met Frank outside the Wheatsheaf public house. We were going to look at a job that was on the other side of the estate. We were both early, so we decided to stop on the spur of the moment.
I suggest you both went to that betting shop knowing Mr. Mullings would be there, and you went there with the deliberate intention of involving him in a gambling operation expressly to plunge him into debt.
I've already said Mr. Mullings was free to come and go as he chose.
Having manoeuvred Mr. Mullings into debt, you arranged that the sum owed could be cancelled out if he succeeded in influencing the jury to obtain your brother's acquittal.
If the debt was to be overlooked, then Mr. Mullings would have had his IOU returned.
Mr. Hewitt, I suggest that document had a change of use. It then became your insurance policy.
Mr. Mallory, I want the jury to be perfectly clear on these points, so shall we just go over them? You say that when you first met Mr. Hewitt and Mrs. Coleman in the Imperial Hotel, the girl you were with, who you knew as Sheila, she was simply a casual acquaintance. Is that right?
That's right. I met her at the bar about an hour previously.
Did you learn her surname or anything about her? Her address, background?
I knew nothing about her at all.
You haven't seen her since?
No, my lord.
You also say that you never at any time introduced Mrs. Coleman to a photographer named Sylvester. Is that right?
Never.
Thank you, Mr. Mallory.
Now, Mr. Mallory, do you claim it was simply coincidence that found you and Mr. Hewitt in the same betting shop as Mr. Mullings?
Yes.
I suggest you had prior knowledge that Mr. Mullings would be in that establishment.
No.
I suggest your intention of going into that betting shop was to snare Mr. Mullings.
I only have one intention when I go in a betting shop, and that's to make money. And I made no money out of Mullings yet because he ain't paid me.
There's a submission of the Crown, Mr. Murray, that you were paid in full by Mr. Mullings' actions in the jury room. So how would you describe your meetings with Mrs. Coleman and Mr. Hewitt in the Imperial Hotel? They were all coincidence also?
Yes.
I put it to you that it was your intention when you met Mrs. Coleman at the Imperial Hotel to involve her in a very carefully staged intrigue.
I was at the Imperial Hotel for the same reason as Bob and everybody else, to have a good time. Now I'll put something to you. This whole trial's a frame-up, because young Donny got off.
The truth of the matter is that you and Mr. Hewitt engineered the whole charade.
There was no charade. I'm a carpenter, not a performer.
Members of the jury, this has been a long and complex trial, perhaps further complicated, dealing, as it did, with the events which occurred during the trial of Donald Hewitt some several months ago. Now, members of the jury, when you come into this building and take your place in the jury box, some may think you enter a more rarefied air. I mean, proceedings are respectful, tradition is observed. Now, this is not intended to awe you. The environment here is just as real as it is outside. Now, you are 12 decent citizens fulfilling your civic duties, and when you enter this building, your ordinary common sense is what is required. Now, don't leave that outside. You must use it here. Now, just bring your common sense to bear on what you've heard. Ask yourself, does the evidence match the dictates of my common sense? Now, let's first consider the evidence of Mr. Mullings. I mean, it is the contention of the Crown that Mr. Mullings was selected as a victim because, as you have heard, he was an unrepentant gambler. Now, this is not a crime, although some people may regard it as a weakness, and I would like to submit to you this is exactly what Mallory and Hewitt specialised in. They exploited weakness. Now, let me appeal to your common sense. I mean, were they in that betting shop purely by coincidence, or, as I suggest, it was a carefully planned visit with the express intention of waylaying Mr. Mullings? Now, you no doubt recall my learned friend holding up the now extant IOU, waving it around with all the confidence that Neville Chamberlain did with his agreement at Croydon Airport. Now, you need be no age or keen student of history to know what that was worth. And it's my contention that IOU has the same value. Now, let's turn to Mrs. Coleman. It is the contention of the Crown that Mr. Hewitt and Mr. Mallory surveyed each member of that jury, and they stalked Mrs. Coleman. She was buttered up, I must almost say programmed, because it soon became evident that she was a very vulnerable woman. I mean, you've heard, she was unwanted, unloved, she was unhappy at home, and she quite predictably fell for the charms of Robert Hewitt, the considerable charms, you may think. Now, it's the case with the prosecution that of the two witnesses, the choice and treatment of Mrs. Coleman was the most heartless. Now, members of the jury, the charge brought against these defendants is a conspiracy existed to corrupt a jury, and that Robert Hewitt and Frank Mallory were its principal architects. Now, it is the contention of the Crown that this has been made blatantly obvious to you by the evidence you have heard in this court, and after the proper consideration, you will decide that there can be no other verdict but guilty. Thank you. Mrs. Forrest.
Thank you. Listening to my learned friend address you, I'm reminded of a film reviewer of the 1940s who once described a low-budget Hollywood production as one cinematic cliché superimposed on another. Members of the jury, I would suggest that the case for the prosecution is one legal cliché superimposed on another. I'm almost tempted to use clichés myself and suggest that there has not been one piece of solid evidence produced in this court by which you could convict, without a shadow of a doubt, the defendants in the box. Assertions, innuendos, statements which did not always bear the hallmark of untarnished truth. These we have heard in abundance. But as for solid evidence, I would suggest that has been conspicuous by its absence. Now, members of the jury, if ever a two-edged sword existed, it is Mr. Mullins' IOU. What the prosecution allege about that is this, that Mr. Mullins was trapped into getting himself into debt, that a legitimately drawn-up agreement was formalised between Hewitt, Mallory and Mullins to establish the sum owed, that then Hewitt and Mallory held this debt over Mullins and thus got him to pervert the jury. Assuming then that they had achieved their aim, or at least that the jury had arrived at what for them was a satisfactory verdict, they held on to the IOU as insurance against Mullins going to the police. Now, you have had the opportunity of seeing Mullins for yourself in the witness box. Did he not strike you as wily, enterprising, worldly, an opportunist, a man very much on the ball? Can you accept that a man such as Mullins would allow a debt of £2,350 to remain perpetually over his head? Bring your common sense to bear on that, members of the jury, and I'm sure you will find it a most unlikely tale. Let us now consider Mrs. Emily Coleman, because it is really on her evidence in my submission that the bulk of the Crown's case rests. It was Mrs. Coleman's actions in going to the police that led to the investigations resulting in this trial. What were her motives? Members of the jury, I would suggest that her motives are as old as man. She was at a climax in life. She is, at an age which a great many women find very difficult. She felt she was losing her attraction, and when Hewitt paid her attention, she blossomed and experienced for a few months the excitement of youth. But I suggest she was too intense, too demanding. She frightened Hewitt away, or perhaps he would have tired of her. In any case, it is sad, but it is not criminal that a man should hold out hopes and then shatter them. I suggest that this is what happened to Emily Coleman. She desired a long-term relationship. Mr. Hewitt was seeking a temporary haven. When he wanted to move on, she became desperate. She wouldn't let go. And when he insisted that the relationship was over, her love turned to hate, and she became determined to get her revenge. To sum up, what we, the defence, say is this, that Mr. Mullins has exploited the opportunity of cancelling a gambling debt, and Mrs. Coleman is attempting to revenge herself on her lover. That, in my submission, is where the true facts lie, and I have no doubt you will agree and find both the defendants not guilty.
And finally, members of the jury, it is for you to consider the evidence and to decide who among the witnesses has been telling the truth. I think it is indicative of this entire trial that even in what seems to me such a relatively minor matter as whether Mrs. Coleman met Mr. Hewitt in a print and gift shop or at a bus stop, there was no consensus of agreement. I will remind you of these points. The burden of proof lies with the prosecution, and you must be sure that the charges that they have brought against the defendants are proved, and you must regard the case against each defendant separately, quite separately. I will also remind you of your oath. I swear by Almighty God that I will faithfully try the several issues joined between our sovereign lady the Queen and the defendants and give a true verdict according to the evidence. Will you now retire, elect a foreman to speak for you, and consider your verdict?
Will the foreman please stand? Do you find the defendant, Robert Hewitt, guilty or not guilty of conspiring to pervert the course of justice?
Guilty.
And is this the verdict of you all?
It is.
Do you find the defendant, Frank Mallory, guilty or not guilty of conspiring to pervert the course of justice?
Guilty.
And is this the verdict of you all?
It is.
The crime of which you have been found guilty is an extremely serious one, striking as it does in this particular case at the very heart of our legal system, namely trial by jury. Bearing this in mind, and considering both your previous convictions and the seriousness of the charge in the original trial, I have no hesitation in sending you, Robert Hewitt, to prison for 5 years. I consider that you, Frank Mallory, played a somewhat less central part in the conspiracy. You shall go to prison for a term of 4 years. Take them down.